I'm gonna go ahead and start recording. All right. I'm not familiar with Zoom recording, so I'm going to go with, it says it's recording in the top left and it's not going to give me a countdown. So, what's that?
No, just to say this is, I think, a first for me to record also in this. So I'm learning as we go.
Wonderful, me too. I just got a Zoom Pro account and I tried to set up the live stream today and it didn't really work out for me. You ran into a 24-hour wait period, I think YouTube has, on setting up the live stream. So, well, maybe next time. But I did want to record this and thank you for meeting with me on this, because one of the things that I think is important is to start building a library or a repository of these sorts of conversations. One of the things that I noticed through my working with the JBP Daily Forum and well, particularly there, but some of the other online communities too, is that we really have a lot of information just between us, just between the, I've heard people call us ordinary people, but I don't know if I really like that term so much. It seems like we have a tendency in society right now to look for particular leaders in an area and look to them for all of the answers. So we almost set up and ask for this sort of broadcast modality.
Right.
And what I see and what I sense that I'm observing it happen right now in the GameD space is this drive to connect more on a small group sort of level and explore a lot of these things on our own. And that's something really exciting. So when you put this post up here about the, I just had it on the top of my tongue, the mini degrees and micro scholarships.
Yep.
That really hit a chord with me. I was just having some discussions about organizing small groups around a project to use that as a way to find out or explore what GameD is, as well as create these sorts of pieces of information to feed back into the community in sort of a Wikipedia sort of fashion or a library sort of fashion.
Yep.
And it was so great because this week I ended up coming up with, I think, 4 or 5 different interviews with people about the education and about building these small group dynamics and about structuring these sorts of repositories. So I'm really excited. You're the first on my list of people to talk to. So can you tell me a little bit about how you came into this bit degree and micro scholarships?
Sure. For about 3 decades, in fact, there was a transformative moment in about 30 years ago where I walked in late into a conference and a woman was talking about all of these terrible experiences we've had in classrooms, you know, within these kind of unidirectional impartings of learning and insights. And she said, imagine if you had it's like a steering wheel, and you had, as things were coming at you, the ability to put a pause button and then steer to get a definition or to get an example or a rule of thumb or a visualization, whatever it is that would make at that moment for clarity. And she linked that to also the fact that when people are listening to a linear kind of conversation or discussion or presentation, they're going to remember maybe 20% of it. And we've built this whole education apparatus around the notion that, you know, putting people into classrooms or into these distance learning kinds of things, at the end of the day, that 20% is going to be there. Well, you know, we're now headlong into a period where the shelf life of insights is going way, way down.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 20% that you do remember, the actual part that's useful to you a year, 2, 3 years down the road in many domains, it's kind of asymptotically, vanishing. So the notion of on-demand learning, just-in-time learning, sprang from that, from Gloria Gary's comments. And for a number of years, I kind of focused heads down on setting up technology parks and free economic zones in various parts of the world. But that insight never left me. And I've, in addition to trying to juggle these other projects, been very passionate about seeing how we can move toward granular on-demand learning. And that's what the Bit Degree folks, I think, have brought to a new level. And another group I can talk about a bit is Teacher, misspelled, TEACHUR.co. But it does open the field now for very much more of a level field, adaptive, user-sensitive experience and learning. So that's what I'd love to see if Game B, taking some of the new tools and platforms, can use that to get people exploring.
Yeah, that was one of the things that really struck me. I want to go back real quick and talk about the just-in-time learning, because when I was in the Air Force in our career field, that's one of the things we relied on heavily, was the just-in-time learning, and it really increased our capacity in our career field. So the training that I was in was for special instruments, and it used to take a long time, and they would teach everybody everything. But then they would split them up into their own little specialties.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, they changed how they do that, and they just teach the specialty that the particular airman is going to go and work on. So you don't have to learn 80% of stuff you're never going to use, or likely not going to. But if they do need you, then all they have to do is pull you back in and give you a smaller module of retraining. So
Yeah.
it's very, very effective.
And one of the other moments of insight came when our daughter Alexa, in junior high school and middle school, she had one of these science posters, trifold things, and I looked at how she had organized her science project, and I went, "Holy cow! There's a deep pattern here in totally unrelated domains." I began, it kind of woke me to the notion of a fractal pattern. So even if people in just-in-time learning environments or other learning environments are kind of branching off into specialized areas, I've become quite keen on the prospect that we can do much better at communicating across these silos. By having reference to a heart, head, hands pattern that's either fully present or there to be filled out as we go along our different learning paths. So that's prompted a project which is coming now to the point of being soon, I hope, close to a beta, called Learning Landscapes, where a colleague that I found through Freelance Market, freelancer.com, with a $250 initial project, has created a system where one can pour content, for example, blog posts or entire books that are tagged according to some outliner style hierarchical indenting kind of thing. And they can immediately spread out onto a 3D landscape.
Wow.
Where you've got paths that take you through the first part, the second part, and then further branching paths that take you to subsections in those domains. And where it gets really, and you can skim in the sense of getting one-sentence summaries of each of these elements of the source material, or a paragraph or full full page summary, or dive straight into the original content. But where it gets interesting beyond that is the concept that in a peer learning environment, anyone can plant knowledge trees at any point in whatever the source material was that they were interested. And this is where this heart, head, hands pattern, a kind of spirit, mind, body triad, can branch out to say, okay, on this blog post that Daniel made, on this particular point that he's raising, that strikes a chord. And I'd like to see a knowledge tree and fill out a knowledge tree reflecting what emotionally is attracting me or causing tension, what in terms of my imagination, the head, I see as an ideality and a strategy. And then in terms of action, what the test or the follow-through actions can be. So it's essentially an invitation for people in the peer learning environment to engage, and either for their own sake of just putting up a knowledge tree that's for them, or better, to share and invite co-creation. This system is designed to allow for many, many kinds of inputs, and also the creation of breadcrumb trails, so that if a person is particularly keen on linking together content within these interactive 3D domains, they can essentially put GPS markers down and invite you to come explore on various newly created paths with a feedback system to make them better over time. So that's the Learning Landscape app in kind of quick strokes. But again, I think it'd be lovely with the just-in-time learning, granular approach to people being able to engage, but then also to be able to explore and share in these heart, head, hand patterns, that we could see some pretty cool discoveries and insights flowing from that.
Yeah, so when you talk about the learning landscape, do you really mean on a 3D plane? You said it's in a
Yes.
3D way. So is this like a geocache sort of learning? Like that
Well,
large?
maybe ultimately, but the idea is with augmented reality, extended reality, coming soon, that we could create a 3D visual environment, actually 2.5D in the beta, but something that's intuitive, that uses bio metaphors basically, for people to go explore. So it's like mind maps that are 2D, but they're rotated onto a terrain, and they have a 3D experience for people with these knowledge trees and branches within the knowledge trees that follow this heart, head, hands pattern.
I find that fascinating because I have my 10-year-old Caleb. He is a very physical learner. He has to be doing something physically in order to really remember something. So to have something projected in a 3D space, one of their favorite games, we have a VR system. They love Google Earth. So when they're like traveling around and walking around stuff, they learn a tremendous amount that way. And that's so different than what we use in classrooms today, where everybody is sitting still.
Indeed.
I know for myself, if I want to remember, I know where almost everything is in my house, but it's because I've actually physically walked around there, and it's imprinted on some muscle memory. So when I think about where something is, I think about something physiological, like how I am, where it is relative to me standing in physical space. That's really interesting concepts.
Well, it is, and we've got millions of years of evolution of being able to scan quickly natural landscapes, and spot stuff that is intriguing or threatening or whatever. So having, I think, the ability to take existing material and immediately pour it into these terrains that are respecting the integrity of the original material and its patterns, the structure of the paths, but then having this this interface for people to engage on specific parts of it that they wish to, and instead of getting lost in all these little silos and cubby holes of specialized inscrutable content, to have the interface in a familiar, natural way be, here's what resonates or creates tension emotionally. Here are things that let me see a phase change or state jump, ideality, maybe adjacent or somewhat adjacent.
Yeah.
Here are things that let one imagine the path to get there. And here are tests in the world of action, and follow through on the tests in the world, again, of action. So if we can figure out natural ways for people to interact with this, even with voice, to respond, and see the transcript then immediately appear, or if there's an ask, a request, or an offer, to have that appear as a flower or as a fruit, and to use other, again, familiar natural metaphors for people to interact.
Yeah, very much more engaging. I want to take a second and say welcome, Ramsey and Bentley. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Just thought we'd drop in.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Feel free to, if you have any comments or questions, please. That's what this is here for. So when you're talking about engagement, Mark, one of the things that I was considering was collaboration style engagement. So instead of seeing a student as an individual who's on their own particular individual learning path, seeing a small group of individuals on a learning path together. That way they can also learn the art of collaboration on a project and get some of the pure learning dynamics in it.
Yes.
So I was taking that and the concept of motivation, purpose, and meaningfulness being the primary incentives for motivation. I know with my own children, if they're interested in something, if there's something meaningful and purposeful, they will learn all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't expect that they would. So that really falls back into the just-in-time learning that you were discussing. It seems like a very natural and efficient way to learn what you need to progress to the next thing. And one of the things that I was playing around with building on as a part of Ulixia Digital was to set up these sorts of projects where we can organize small groups and have projects around discovering what Game B is, or exploring the space, finding out what resources are there. We have James Allen's done a fantastic paper on a lot of these topics, exploring that. And we have, I can't remember the gentleman's name, who's building a brain map or mind map of it. That's fantastic also. And there are so many other tangential projects that are similar, that are happening like that too. And they're already doing it, but they're not really highly collaborated yet. Some have seen more success in the collaboration than others, but I was really interested in the micro scholarships on here with the blockchain, and how to, well, for one, how do we incentivize people to be able to do this, right? Not just, there's purpose and meaning, which is a fantastic incentive, but also people need financial means to be able to support themselves if they're going to do it for an extended period of time. How do we incentivize that without muddying that purpose and meaning incentive structure? So I like the idea of the micro scholarships for that.
Mhm.
And there's also building a portfolio. So instead of pursuing an education path like what we have in a typical university, where you don't know how you're going to respond to what you're going to learn a couple years down the road when you start off on a path that you get committed to, right? This is why a lot of students change their degree paths, because they get halfway in and realize this is not for them. But to approach it more of an artistic portfolio type of style.
Yep.
So one example, and this is just spitballing, would be you have a small group of 4 to 5 individuals who come up with a collective topic that hasn't been really well explored in Game B. And they
Mhm.
spend a month working together and investigating that, and then bring back or produce a video demonstrating what they learned, or an article or some sort of thing like that to put in their portfolio over
Yep.
what they learned, in addition to a reflection individually of what they learned in the process of collaborating,
Yep.
right?
Cool.
And that be the product that gets put back into the community in a library resource or a Wikipedia repository or something like
Mhm.
that, for people who come in next to use that as a branch, right? And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I love that, and it suggests that the learning emerges, and it is not like preordained that,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we're going to check box off these things, but the discoveries that come out of it are much more true to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the spirit of Game B. And where, as you were describing this, I think what Game B is about, or at least for me, is the notion of whole people or whole persons interacting, or potentially whole persons, and that this respect for people as themselves fields of emergence of in not just the fragmented, fractured ways that Game A treats people, I think is the most appealing of all the many resonances Game B can send out. So having a system, I think, woven into these learning environments that lets people show, to the degree they're comfortable, who they are as whole
Mm-hmm.
people, meaning their personal, their business, and their civic facets or frames of reference, um, their their mind, their spirit, their body frames of reference. And I was over the Indian Ocean about 12 years ago reading The Economist on a flight, and it, I was really struck. It got me. It was talking about altruism across species lines, cases where unrelated, biologically not closely related sentient beings were going at risk to help one another. And it just sparked at that point. Um, I I'd been quite influenced, early on by ideas of evolutionary psychology and sociobiology. So that stuff is largely about the notion of selfish genes
Mm-hmm.
and selfish memes. Um, one being replicators of form, and the other being replicators of ideas. And as I was reading this article, I began to think, wow, okay, bodies make genes, minds make memes. What do what does spirit make to
Mm-hmm.
replicate? And it took me, it fumbled for years trying to figure out a name for that, but settled on lumines as the
Mm-hmm.
thing that we sense if we meet people across species lines, sentient beings that exhibit qualities um, of that are admirable in terms of patterns of emotional response,
Mm-hmm.
their courage, or their acts of kindness or generosity, that we feel moved, even if in the narrow sense of our biological survival, we're going at risk. But we do feel the call to see those admirable qualities of spirit flourish,
Mm-hmm.
these patterns of replicable patterns of emotional response. So part of what's drawn me more and more into this realm of learning landscapes is the notion that people who want to play and share paths of discovery can have a geometry that's also fractal, to show what they care about. And it's basically like a Maslow pyramid, but simplified. So if we have a valuing triangle of what we care about for our physical, bodily well-being, what we care about for our spiritual well-being, what we care about for our intellectual health and well-being, that can form the base of a pyramid. And what we value at the center are things that resonate with all at once. In other words, it's kind of a golden attractor. Some things we cherish because they help us in mind, body, and spirit. But there's also this Maslow aspect where in survival mode, what we put as being valuable within this valuing triangle may be quite different than what in a comfort level of this pyramid or in this generative level.
Mm-hmm.
So part of what we've done with the help of a great guy named Robert Reed in Public Invention is come up with a prototype for these what we call social tetrahedrons, so that people in a learning landscape or any network, peer-to-peer network, can share if they wish. Okay, in comfort situations, here are the go-to projects or things that I cherish or people that I care about. In survival mode, drag and drop them in there. In generative modes, so being able to get a sense of the whole person in that respect. And the other part of this is to be able to attach asks and offers, so that at varying levels of access, people can see, okay, the civic work that I'm doing could really use, a gift of someone's, half hour of their time to help in designing a poster for a concert that's coming up, or helping a shut-in neighbor put together an album of her life. These kind of requests can give us a constant sense, if in a trust network, of what people can give and what they can ask for. And so that, I hope, is going to more and more replace the monetized sorts of, okay, I'm going to earn money so I can do this charitable contribution. If we do have opportunities to engage with each other in person-to-person ways, but also ways that are not time-consuming. And this is where the notion of the micro scholarships and the little granular courses, I think, fits right in.
Yeah.
That people, if they're looking for insights or how to help on something, that they'll be able to, Game B participants will be able to offer these nano courses or micro courses, or assemble them into something a little more. And those can be free, or they can have a cost, but be covered if people at the end do pass some sort of quick quiz showing that they've grasped what that was. Then they get automatically, through a smart contract, through a bit degree, they get a micro stipend that offsets whatever they may have paid up front. So
Yeah.
that's the ecosystem, hopefully, for it.
Yeah, I really like that. And one thing that comes to mind, well, a lot of things come to mind, to be honest. One thing is how so much of that personal touch and that personal interaction is missing from our current education system.
Mm-hmm.
How isolated and individualized it is, and it's focused on what you learn, not how you learn it or how you apply it, really. So one of the things that I've been keeping an eye on, because I love this stuff, is the gamification of life.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all kinds of apps that come out. If you want, it's one of my favorites is Level Up Life, where you're this like role-playing character, and you have certain stats that you're trying to raise up, and there are projects and tasks that you do that have increases in particular areas. So instead of offering these projects like you're describing as micro courses per se, you can, after the person has completed them and has written a reflection, which I also think is a very important part of understanding what they did and articulating what they learned and how it was useful. But then after the fact, go back and say, well, that increased certain aspects, and then find a course for it to fit into at that point, right? So, I mean, if you have putting together a notebook or a scrapbook for a shut-in neighbor, and that's something you want to collaborate on as a project, every individual participating might learn different skills from that. So they can do the same project and get completely different coursework out of it, right? Someone might have more of the computer-based skills for using Shutterfly, because that's the aspect they worked on. Some might have more of a communication style in talking to the neighbor and figuring out what it is exactly they wanted in it. You know, some might have more of a design aspect. And that way you can take one course or one project and, you know, go all of those different ways with it. So.
Yes. Yeah, and having it mapped to, I mean, I think there are varying near opportunities for this to work. One is with more and more people who are being displaced with automation and bots, you know, doing things that people once did. It's going to be freeing up a whole lot of time for folks who are already turning to social networks and giving more and more investment allegiance emotionally to them. It will free up a lot of time for people to do exactly the kinds of engagements and explorings that you've described. I think there's another very encouraging trend, which is in schools, the creation of micro-societies. Hundreds of schools now have half the school day where kids are creating their constitution that will, you know, be the rules of the road, having, you know, creating their own currency systems, having various, you know, news outlets and people being advocates. If somebody's getting bullied, they can be a lawyer, and you know, so it brings kids into not this disfigured game A like silo system, but has them as co-participants in shaping this and setting their own marketplaces up and launching their own ventures. And so this kind of thing, I think, as we get more into a wide access to augmented reality and virtual reality, it's going to be possible for these virtual networks to create micro societies that offer for people, you know, informative times in their lives, these the same kind of experiences, like as you say, in a game or playful like way. Game still to me has this kind of win-lose connotation. but play is much more, I think, potentially at least more omni-win, possibly. So I think having these on-ramps in the form of play, but serious play, if you want it to be serious, and having ways to reward, have crowdfunding or digital giving, that's key to the success of learners in turning what they've got in the way of their insights into something that can be crowdfunded for actual rollout more widely. And this is where I think one of the interfaces with Game A opportunities may be for the kind of generative things that Game B creates in the way of learning experiences to trigger action in the way of crowdfunding and have some sort of reputation systems that are key to how far these things get out into um, the rest of the world.
So I've been thinking about that, and one of the projects that I worked on was ThinkSpot, which was a Patreon challenger from Dr. Peterson. And I don't really know a whole lot about Patreon, but I do know about crowdfunding, and that is one way for artists to get funding for their projects through donations. So one of the things that I can do on the site that I'm building is I can create clubs, is what they're called, that people can join on a monthly subscription fee or even a one-time sort of thing. And the people who own the clubs can have their own storefronts or different things like that. But that structure is there. And what I was thinking is, if we, instead of using it as collaborators, like what, or not collaborators, sorry, contributors, like what you see on YouTube, they're all contributors. How about have collaborator profiles where I'm an individual collaborator and I'm signing up, and here on this club or this page, you can see all of the work that I've done, all of the skills that I've increased, those sorts of things, and people can donate directly to me to be able to contribute, to collaborate in these projects, right? The projects that I pick that are interesting to me.
Yep. Well, here's a kind of speculative leap, but it gets very much in the direction of a new economy, a gift economy. A lot of the troubles that arise in co-ops and nonprofits and collaborative environments is this sense of having coming in with great heart and goodwill to collaborate, and then having the sense of, okay, I've put my heart into this and done something, and oh wow, it's not really clicking with the folks that it was intended to be helpful for. And so I think in actual and virtual environments, the notion of giving it's nourishing, it's flourishing, but it comes with a shadow of vulnerability, which if it's not, if the gift is off for whatever reason, it can be hurtful to, or feel hurtful to people. So and this applies in learning too, that students may come in and put a lot of effort into making a great scrapbook or trying to make a great scrapbook, but it may or not be something that meshes well. So I think part of a Game B approach to learning is essentially to have very soft landing pads if people try something and it doesn't work, and 80–90% of the stuff people try, at least entrepreneurially, doesn't work. And rather than have that be cratering to the ego, what Vinay Gupta suggested is a new kind of venture capital. And he was referring to a particular case of moonshot projects, of getting 1,000 moonshot entrepreneurs together, all of which face minuscule odds of success. But if there is a way where they earn into it and actually have a lot of promise, having little micro shares or micro stakeholdings in one another's moonshots becomes a great way for the system of innovation to flourish.
So one of the things
Sorry, just to finish one sentence,
yeah,
and I think that principle of having shared stakeholdings, even if they're very small or symbolic, in the health of the whole in an enterprise, that changes the dynamics. So the failure of any individual to click in terms of their input isn't shattering, because they see the fuller context that they are part of a shared upside with whoever comes up with a better way to do the scrapbook or whatever the project is.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I want to ask a couple of questions and clarification, because some of the things that I'm hearing sound like the scholarship, micro scholarship, or the funding is attached to an outcome.
Yeah.
Okay, so that, all right, yeah, just making sure. Yes, if you have the funding attached to a specific outcome, you have that potential. What I'm suggesting is that is not the case. The funding is attached to a specific individual.
And I would drop back to say that even if the current system of bit degree, which I happened upon only weeks ago and I'm still learning about, even if it is focused on a measure of proficiency, proving that you've passed a quiz, that individual recognition and that release of the financial cost from the course, that is individual. But what if people coming into this ecosystem, every time a person succeeded in their individual respect, they're also expanding the pool of resources or the pool of opportunities for others in their cohort, in their team. So that in that sense, it's no longer this win-lose kind of perception, but it's a win-win. Whoever is flourishing and succeeding is creating this team lift, and I think that changes the culture potentially if it's done that way.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and that's where the attaching the funding to a specific outcome is where you get into the perversion of incentives, and you start to mess with the purpose and meaning, and it's a false incentive. There seems like there's some sort of premise or axiom that needs to be there, where if people are left to pursue what they find meaningful and purposeful, that is the best state that they have individually for learning. And as a result, the best way and pathway for them to contribute to the community as a whole. Now, it is absolutely the case, we've seen this many times through history, where someone pursues something that the general community finds really odd, but hey, that's how our medical system was born, because they were pursuing things that the rest of society did not find worthwhile. So how do we still incentivize those things where as a group or as a community, we may not see the value of it right at that time, right? That's why I think there should be a decoupling there.
Well, what if the idea of crowdfunding can be meshed with the idea of bounties, the X Prize model or the Gates Foundation model of let's see what big thing or medium-sized small thing incentive is basically a mirror of X Prize, but applied with $5,000, $10,000 bounties for social and technological breakthroughs. So let's say a community, actual community or a virtual community, says here are the moonshots we would like, or the puddle jumps, the more manageable things that we would love to see an innovation help resolve. If crowdfunding, if we're talking about pooling game A resources, crowdfunding is a way to do that. And it can set up an outcome measure that, the breakthrough will, the threshold that it would meet to release the prize. I think that approach changes the nature of a lot of these competitions, because the crowdfunding is the source. It's coming from the community, and the people are saying what social impact they're looking for. The other part of this is that to the degree there are still individual rewards, I would love to see a gift economy emerge based not on payments coming directly to us. For example, let's say Bentley is looking for someone to do web research for a venture he wants to launch, and he offers in return for somebody who can help him survey or do some case studies about similar ventures. He will gift his skill in programming. I'm making it up here, but that he will give 5 hours of programming time to whoever meets whatever outcome or can help his project achieve its outcome. But the difference between the traditional market where, okay, somebody does something and they get paid personally for it, is that if we have user profiles that show each other as our whole selves within our valuing systems, we can show the causes or the people that are most dear to us in given settings. So the way that if I helped Bentley, with the case studies to his project, he would then gift his programming time not to me personally, but rather to one of the cherished things in my empathic self, my higher self. And I think that would create some maybe wonderful kind of dynamics that go beyond the one-to-one sort of tit for tat game theory things.
Yeah, I really like that idea because that breaks it out of just what's in it for me, right? I'm not going to help you unless you have something to offer me. But there may be in the larger community places where those skills might be useful. That's really fantastic. I like that. With tying the prize to specific, even if it's crowdfunded and you have, I don't know, I'm not familiar with the X Prize model or with the Microsoft,
yes,
Bill Gates Foundation model.
Right.
I'm not really familiar with those particular incentive models or how they work specifically to them. But what it sounds like is that you still have the issue where you're tying a cash reward to a specific outcome. Which
That's right.
There's been studies that show that money can be
demotivating. Yes.
Well, it's particularly for cognitive thinking and creative problem solving. It can cause really big issues there. So I wonder how we would be able to come up with something that kept that separate.
The X Prize, that Peter Diamandis launched it with the aim of getting entrepreneurs to open this frontier of space. So they raised $10 million, and the money came from a woman in Iran, an aerospace engineer who had come to the U.S. And the Ansari X Prize was the first of these $10 million awards. They've applied them also for learning breakthroughs, for tablets that let kids in communities that have very low literacy become literate without teachers. That was a recent X Prize. So these are the kind of, they're open source projects in the sense of the money is keyed in the X Prize for the e-learning, is keyed to open source software that can demonstrate outcomes for the communities that
And
it's
often on
offering.
those, the amount of money is less than it took to
Right.
win the prize, and only one group gets it. I'm not sure that that's the right model for what we're looking for, but just to clarify what their existing model is.
No, thank you.
Because, to get up into space cost them a lot more than $10 million. The learning prize, they might have been able to do it for $10 million. Yeah. So that's an interesting model, but is there another way to?
Jordan has talked about prestige, and I think that that's another aspect of the prize models, is that it maps to the chance for reputation to become much more visible. And again, I think that it's a kind of knife edge that can drive people in very egoistic, narrow ways. But if the fundamentals of the new economy are not doing things that generate direct benefit to you materially, but rather have the benefits flow, maybe the prestige stays with the person, but the material aspects of it go to good causes that person is particularly caring about. I think that approach might introduce or be a transition away from the egoistic kind of I won and you didn't dynamic.
Gentlemen, we have about 5 minutes left. So is there anything any of you want to add? I know, Eric, I didn't welcome you, but thank you for joining. No? Well, one last thing I had as a question was, did you know, Mark, how the blockchain was used specifically in this for the degree, for the micro degrees?
I can't speak, in terms of anything more than an inference, but I did dive in with a similar platform called Teacher, which I mentioned for people who came in a bit later. It's also a blockchain-based granular learning system. And all the content in Teacher is free. Any entrepreneurial learner or teacher is welcome to come in and put together learning objectives that are very granular. And linked to each one is a quiz that's is created by the originator of the learning object. So anyone can come in free and access any of these learning objects in this whole system. But if they want to get a nano credential that's blockchain recorded, there's a micropayment that gets made. And that does flow to the benefit of the creator of the learning object. But what's cool about this is that anyone can come in and leave breadcrumb trails amongst the various objects in all these different courses and create their own course from the existing free content. And the deal is that anyone who comes in to learn, who also wants the blockchain recorded micro credential, makes a tiny payment. And that's how the originators enrich each other, basically, of the content. So the more people coming in and creating content that's free, but has these many certifications, the more everybody benefits from it.
One last question about that. Do you have any insight or idea how these micro certifications or nano certifications might be used in a game A type world? Like if we're talking about accreditation or any of the something transitional from where people are familiar with education and what it's supposed to do and how people can use this to still convince other people that they actually learned something, I guess.
Okay, so yeah, in brief, what I think will be happening is a lot of people are going to be thrown out of their comfort zones in Game A because crumbling, and they're going to be looking at how to show the remnants of Game A that they've got, credentials that are now valued, and especially how transitioning into Game B can be done. So, for example, freelancers, there are 40 million freelancers in global markets now, like Fiverr.com, Freelancer.com. 80% of them never get a single project. And the reason is that they have no track record. They have no credentials. So an example of how these nano degrees or micro scholarships could help an immediate audience of 30 million is to invite them in to engage, for example, with Game B content, learning resources, conversations, papers. Invite them to get familiar with a, Game B 101, and to do work study micro projects as part of their engaging, to post a YouTube clip saying how this insight from Game B can improve the quality of their life or others' lives right now. So having the ability with micro scholarships for us to crowdfund Game B micro scholarships that lead to the individuals that are now starving for credentials, starving for reputation, by routing these micro scholarships through Fiverr.com or Freelancer.com. This gives them their first entry project. It gives them a reference. And again, a soft landing system so that if the project doesn't click in terms of it grasping some core ideas well, it's not doom for the person, but rather now the chance to go into another learning round with maybe somewhat different work study opportunities, so that it's ready when they're ready to give them the affirmation in this globally visible market. So that's a transition that I'd be very keen to to see us try to make happen.
Yeah, personally, as somebody who has been stuck waiting tables for years without anybody giving me an opportunity or a chance to do anything different, I have a lot of compassion, and I'm glad you were able to talk about that a little bit and to show how that's one way that we could put this immediately to use. Thank you so much. That gets some gears turning on how we can really help some people.
Right.
Is there anybody else?
I'm
Anything? Go ahead, Mark.
I'm glad to see faces and to some degree voices. Ramsey, I have been very interested. I have come from the left, and have very keen kind of also appreciation of entrepreneurial markets. I know you've made a journey, and what are your thoughts in terms of the emergence of a gift economy or much more of an omni-win economy on transitioning from here to there, and how learning might help on that?
My feeling on the transition is that it is. I don't see it as something that we can do within game A. I feel it's more of a transition, because my particular understanding of game A and game B has a lot to do with ownership of property, financialization of resources, and decoupling that from financialization and reorienting all of the property to the commons, and then simply issuing currency to each individual in perpetuity. And then essentially the purpose of the currency would be for us to use it to compete to access to the goods that were produced. So to get to that game requires us to build the tools of property titles, which is actually rather simple. And then, because we already have property titles, I mean, people already live in houses, in places. So, but to get to that place, it's more of a switch rather than like a transitionary phase where we're already playing it. So it's more like we're building it, developing consensus, claiming titles, creating the currency tools, linking together all of the supply chain, perhaps using holochain, a lot of the blockchain technologies, perhaps for the direct democracy voting portion of it. But once you have the rules on who controls resources and what that game entails, and how the stewards of those resources, the corporations that are there today, can be re-incentivized for methods other than profit and using this new currency, then we can get to that place. But that's my general feeling. So I don't think this is something, that particular game B formulation that I'm imagining can't be, you can't play that in game A, because it's not like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a digital currency, but it's actually physical in that it's a commodity. It's a piece of property, just like anything else, right? It could be an iPad or a MacBook. It still has a price. And so in that game, Bitcoin is compatible with game A because all of the existing currencies are also unit of exchanges and commodities themselves. So it can play that game, but mine can't, because once you issue this particular currency, it's not property. It is merely a unit of exchange for you to access a good. But once you do, the money doesn't flow. It would simply just delete from your account and then either be within the object that you bought, if there's still value in it, or it would get consumed. Like if there's food or some activity, you would have used your currency and it would delete. And so because it doesn't continue to circulate and you're not actually owning things for purposes of collecting more of this currency, rather you're getting currency as a recognition of value. You're valuable as a human, so we're going to give you currency automatically as UBI. Plus, we can create games of incentivized behavior of work or collaboration in sports and other endeavors that also are value creation and issue more currency. So the issuance of currency is unhindered, has nothing to do with any other outside force, because it's a completely make-believe human construct. And the purpose of that currency in that game would be simply to express our desires so that we could have still an open market, so that we can express our needs and desires and get the things that we want created, and have an avenue also for the producers, the creative people who want to create and compete towards producing these wonderful things, and that avenue, that chance, and be able to collect more value creation for their efforts. And so it's a different game of value creation versus ownership and value extraction that we're playing today. So until we move away from the private ownership of property, we are always going to be in game A. And as long as we own property privately, that means that I control it and therefore you do not, and we're always going to fight. And what has humans done? We've created larger and larger groups to own more of this property. So we created corporations, we created religions, and we created teams, and we joined these teams so that we can So we can basically seize the means of life. And so this is the game that we've been playing forever, and we're still playing this game to this very day. All of war, all of even American politics is economic war. We're still fighting about who's going to get what, how much, who's going to take it from whom. And so it can be no transition. You're either playing game A that extractive ownership private model, or you're not. And in order not to play the game, I don't believe you can beat them by using their money to buy the property. You can just claim it as the common. So we can reset the game by simply saying, hey, you know what? We're going to give you guys more currency for all the assets that you currently own. Everyone's going to cash out of all of their property. Here's some new currency. We're going to play a different game. We're going to manage the property as the commons. You can create the best possible products that you can, and we can create value based on those metrics rather than some arcane metrics of who can sell the most.
Hey, Ramsey.
Yeah.
It's about 10 after, and I've got to wrap this up. I've got another meeting coming on. But so we got to cut the recording, and I'm going to try and get this posted and put a link up in the Facebook group tonight. Okay, guys?
Beautiful.
Nice.
Thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to having some more meetings about this and talking to you a little bit more on this and seeing how things develop.
Thanks for
It's
hosting.
been wonderful. Thank you.
Y'all have a great day.